Next, deregulation and railroad safety. For 12 years, the Reagan and Bush administrations eased government regulations on the rail industry. Now, accident figures on the nation's railroads are cited by critics and supporters alike to make their cases for more or less regulation. We have a report from Fred DeSam Lazaro of public station KTCA St. Paul, Minneapolis.
What's going on?
Okay, there's been a chemical spill into the river. Where do you live?
Here.
Okay, you're gonna have to leave. You can go to senior high school, Gates Gym, or Western Arena.
Last June, thousands of residents in Superior, Wisconsin, and neighboring Duluth, Minnesota, were urged to leave their homes.
There's been a chemical spill. Evacuation route is north or west.
The spill released a cloud with a sweet, nauseating odor. A cancer-causing chemical, benzene, spewed from this tank car. It toppled 60 feet off a railroad trestle.
I saw them getting out that way.
After about 8 hours in makeshift camps and school gymnasiums, residents were permitted to return home. The benzene cloud had moved on and dissipated. Veteran Minnesota legislator Willard Munger's home was in the evacuation zone.
When they stopped to think that we evacuated something between 50 and 60,000 people, it became a very, very serious problem. And it caused me to do some very, very serious thinking on some legislation that I think is absolutely necessary.
The derailment near Duluth is still under investigation, but Munger says most of the suspected causes can be linked to deregulation of the railroad industry. Critics of the industry say wholesale cost-cutting spurred by deregulation has meant rail lines and cars are inspected less frequently. Many tank cars are unsafe, they add, and should not be used to transport hazardous chemicals.
The industry has known that this type of tank car was not a safe tank car.
Lawrence Mann, an attorney for railroad workers and unions, testified at a hearing Munger called on legislation to boost rail safety in Minnesota. Mann said a major accident with many fatalities is inevitable.
Maybe next week or next month or next year, in the middle of a city, a tank car is going to explode, or a tank car is going to run off and break or whatever, and a tremendous community is going to get wiped out. It's just a matter of time.
Last year alone, there were more than 500 derailment accidents in the United States. Mann says that's not counting some 25,000 train automobile crashes. The rail system, he adds, carries the majority of this country's hazardous chemicals.
They're transporting double what they did a few years ago of hazardous materials.
They are doing it with far fewer workers than in recent years, and union leaders say that has compromised safety.
We need somebody out there to catch the cars if they get away from us. We do not have that any longer.
Philip Qualley, a local union official, blamed short staffing for several incidents in his Minnesota switching yard that he said were close calls.
So here you have a conductor running in the dark over railroad ties, 140 yards, he estimated, sprinting to catch his car. If he would not have caught it, the car would have gone through a switch, derailed, tipped over, or if it had made it through the switch, would have rolled 3 miles in a downward decline, or if it did not tip over first. It was a load of sulfur.
Railroad companies argue their system has never been safer. Robert Johnson of Burlington Northern says technology, not deregulation or the profit motive, largely accounts for the smaller workforce.
We used to lay rail 25 years ago with 150 men. Same amount of rail or more with 55 men. So it's those advances that permit us to take advantage of some of those productivity gains and still maintain a safe operation.
To demonstrate their safety program, Burlington Northern officials took us to Wyoming's remote Powder River Basin. Some of the richest coal deposits in the world are here, as is some of the heaviest railroad usage. Among the technological advancements is this ultrasonic detection system. It can pick up the slightest fracture in rail track long before it becomes visible to the naked eye, and long before there's any threat of derailing a train. Not far behind the detection car, a repair gang changes the faulty stretch of rail.
We take a proactive approach to more of a preventative type of maintenance. We do rail grinding, we do shoulder cleaning, we test our rail more frequently, we have top-flight visual inspections.
Railroad officials don't dispute the raw accident statistics cited by their critics. But as the volume of cargo has increased, meaning more trains, more miles, and more cars, they say the accident rate has decreased. Harvey Bradley represented the American Association of Railroads at the Minnesota House hearing.
Between 1982 and 1991, train accidents per million train miles decreased over 38%. Railroad accidents and incidents releasing hazmat range from a high of 65 in 1983 to 35 in 1990. Our shipments have doubled over the last 10 years in hazardous material. While this doubling has occurred, we are moving the traffic more safely. Since 1980, we've had one fatality involving the rail transportation of hazardous material.
You can play with numbers, and I agree that it shows that there's been one death from a particular immediate hazardous materials accident, but that doesn't tell the story.
The story, Mann says, includes numerous railroad workers who are exposed to dangerous chemicals on the job. Many cancer cases among this group could be linked, he claims. He also cites major environmental disasters, like this 1991 accident in Dunsmuir, California. An herbicide called metamsodium spilled into the Sacramento River, killing virtually all aquatic life for 45 miles downstream. In both this accident and in Duluth Superior, Mann notes, a tank car prone to spills was involved.
This 111 type tank car that was involved here is a tank car that the country and the industry has known for many years to be a defective tank car. Yet because of politics and economics and particularly the inaction of the federal government because of the powerful lobby of that industry in Washington, they have not corrected that problem.
Railroad companies, however, say they are in full compliance with safety regulations. Working with chemical manufacturers who own most of the tank cars, they say a program is already underway to move hazardous cargoes in sturdier tank cars, also to fit the controversial 111 cars with some safety enhancements.
The full height head shield as opposed to the half height head shield, we have been pushing for those. And removal or protection of the bottom outlets.
But when pressed for further details on the plan by a union representative, Bradley could offer no timetable.
If railroad labor wants the use of the improved tank car and the general public wants the use of the improved tank car and the shippers want to use it and the Association of American Railroads advocates it, then it's a done deal. No?
We're talking about well over 100,000 cars, possibly. I mean, it's a large number of cars. That's not accomplished overnight.
Also unlikely to change overnight are regulations governing railroad transportation.
The state of Minnesota does have a role to become more involved in railroad safety in this state, perhaps to regulate railroad safety in this state.
States can pass only limited measures. For instance, they can require railroads to notify a community when hazardous materials are brought through. But broader measures, like mandating or setting a deadline for improving tank cars, are in federal domain. And Munger says regulation has been a bad word in Washington in recent years. Further, the 40-year legislative veteran says it usually takes a major crisis to pass sweeping safety or environmental laws.
I had a bill outlawing DDT in Minnesota. I had a heck of a time. I lost it in the committee. So they sprayed Minneapolis and St. Paul with DDT and killed all the robins. And when I had my bill up the second time, they brought in a bushel of dead robins past the bill.
Indeed, regulations that, for example, mandate tighter containers for liquid propane were prompted by a major explosion in 1978 in Tennessee. No one is quite sure yet if spills like the ones near Duluth and Dunsmuir qualify as disasters likely to provide that impetus for re-regulation.